In 2009, a beloved high school teacher locked up her classroom for the weekend and was never seen again. Her car was found abandoned just miles from the school, her phone still inside, the engine cold. For 6 years, the case remained frozen, a ghost story whispered by former students who still remembered her smile. Then, during a classroom renovation, a janitor pried open her old desk and found something hidden beneath the false bottom. A single folded note that would expose a secret no one was ready to believe.
It's October 14th, 2009, a Wednesday night. The hallways are empty now. Classroom doors stand open, papers fluttering on corkboards. The overhead lights flicker, humming softly. Only one light is still on, room 108. Inside, a woman leans over a desk piled high with essays. Her name is Laura Bennett. She's 34, kind-eyed, the kind of teacher who still writes notes of encouragement on every paper. She's exhausted, but there's a quiet warmth in her. The rain is louder now. It drowns out the sound of footsteps echoing down the hall. Laura looks up, listens. Nothing. She exhales, smiles faintly to herself, and gathers her things: a stack of papers, her thermos, the bright red scarf that never leaves her side. Outside the window, the parking lot glows under the orange streetlights. Her car, a faded silver sedan, sits in its usual spot, beads of rain sliding down the windshield. It's 5:12 p.m. She checks her watch, sighs. She's late. In the corner of her desk, a single sheet of paper waits, a draft of something she's been meaning to send. She folds it, slips it into her bag. The last essay she grades that night is titled, "The Truth Always Comes Out." She smiles at that. It feels fitting. The hallway clock ticks loudly as she steps out of her classroom. Keys jingle in her hand. Down the corridor, the janitor mops the floor. "Good night, Miss Bennett," he calls softly. She waves back. "Night, Henry. Don't stay too late." He nods. The mop bucket squeaks. The sound of her heels fades toward the exit. A door opens, then closes. That's it. That's the last time anyone sees Laura Bennett alive. The next morning, the rain has stopped. Sunlight spills through the hallways, bouncing off the lockers. Students drift in laughing, talking, dropping backpacks with the sleepy rhythm of another school day. But when first period begins, room 108 is empty. The desk is neat, untouched. The red scarf is draped over the back of her chair, damp, like it was left there in a hurry. Her thermos is still warm. The bell rings. No Miss Bennett. By noon, whispers ripple through the halls. Maybe she's sick. Maybe she overslept. But by the end of the day, her car isn't in the lot. Principal Richard Cole calls her cell. No answer. He calls again, straight to voicemail. Her apartment manager says her lights were off all night. Her bed, untouched. At 9:30 that evening, her sister files a missing person report. By 11 o'clock, Brookdale police are combing the area around the school. The same place she taught in every day now becomes the center of a crime scene. Flashlights sweep across the parking lot. Detectives mark tire tracks in chalk. Rainwater drips from the gutters. A pair of heels are found in the back stairwell. Her handbag, gone. No sign of struggle. No blood. Just silence. Detective Mark Ellison is assigned to the case. He's methodical, calm, the kind of man who believes every mystery leaves a trace. But this one, it feels different. Too clean. Too quiet. They pull security footage from the west entrance. The camera flickers. Static.
only 30 seconds of black screen. When it comes back, Laura is gone. By Friday, the town is unraveling. Students wear red scarves in solidarity. Parents huddle outside the school, clutching missing posters. Reporters fill the parking lot with microphones and floodlights. "Beloved teacher vanishes without a trace," the headlines read. And inside the police station, the board fills with questions. Who saw her last? Why did she stay so late? Where is her car? No answers.
The janitor, Henry Dorsey, tells investigators he saw her leave at 5:15 p.m. She waved, smiled, and walked toward her car. But the problem? No one else saw her. And the security camera that covered that parking lot entrance? Wiped. For days, they dragged nearby lakes, searched the woods, canvassed every back road for a silver sedan. Nothing. It's like she stepped out of one world and into another. At a press conference, Principal Cole fights back tears. He says Laura was more than a teacher. She was family to this community. We won't stop looking until we find her. Behind him, a line of students hold candles. Their faces flicker in the light, lost, afraid. One of them whispers to another, "She wouldn't just leave." The police dig through her apartment. The place is spotless. A single lamp still on near the couch. A book open on the table, To Kill a Mockingbird. Its final page underlined. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. Detective Ellison stares at it for a long time. A conscience. A secret. Something worth vanishing over. Weeks pass, then months. No leads. Her phone stays dead. Her bank accounts untouched. Her mail stacks up by the door. The school year moves on without her, but her desk, her classroom, stays frozen, locked, lights off. Every so often, a student swears they see someone standing inside at night, a shadow near the window. But when they look closer, nothing there. By spring, the posters fade, and the search efforts slow. The town begins to let go. But not everyone does. Not the students she stayed late to help. Not the families who loved her. And not Detective Ellison, who keeps the case open in his drawer long after it's gone cold. And somewhere, inside the silence of room 108, in the old wooden desk that once belonged to Miss Bennett, something small remains hidden. A note that no one will find for 6 long years. But when it's finally discovered by a student who never even met her, that note will tear the case wide open. The night she disappeared, the rain washed away every trace. But the truth was still there, waiting, beneath the surface, beneath her desk. Before she vanished, Laura Bennett was the kind of teacher every student remembered. Not because her classes were easy, but because she cared. She taught English literature, room 108, Middle Hall, right next to the library. Her lessons were less about essays, more about life. On her classroom wall hung a quote written in bold marker. "Stories teach us who we are when no one's watching." She believed that, lived it. Laura moved to Brookdale in 2006, 3 years before the disappearance. She was new in town, just 31, still finding her footing. The locals said she had that city brightness, the kind that stands out in small towns like Brookdale. A quiet, wooded suburb where people noticed everything and forgot nothing. She rented a modest apartment above the bakery downtown, drove an old silver Honda that stalled every winter, spent weekends reading at the lake or bringing muffins to her elderly neighbor. Simple life, steady rhythm. But behind her soft smile was a loneliness few noticed. Her students adored her. She remembered birthdays, stayed after class to help kids who were falling behind, and hand-wrote little notes on every test. "You're improving, keep going. Don't be afraid to dream bigger." One student in particular stood out. Ethan Myers, a quiet 16-year-old with a sharp mind and a difficult home life. Laura saw something in him. She called it a spark. After class one day, she told him, "Sometimes the people who stay silent the longest are the ones who have the most to say." Ethan never forgot that. Her colleagues respected her, though some said she kept to herself. She skipped after-work dinners, rarely spoke about her personal life. Principal Cole once asked if she was happy at Brookdale. She smiled, nodded, and said, "Happiness is complicated, but I'm where I need to be."
Strange thing to say, but he didn't push. There were rumors, of course. There always are. Some teachers whispered that Laura had left another job abruptly, something about a disagreement with administration. Others said she'd once been engaged, but called it off without warning. No one knew the truth, and she never volunteered it. All anyone knew for sure was that she worked hard, smiled often, and always seemed just a little guarded. In early 2009, a new teacher joined the English department, Thomas Keene. Young, charming, with a confident grin and an easy laugh. Students liked him immediately. He and Laura shared an office for grading papers. At first, they got along fine, polite, professional, but slowly tension crept in. Coworkers noticed small things, her tone tightening when he entered the room, his habit of correcting her in meetings, a strange smile that didn't reach her eyes. One afternoon, a fellow teacher overheard raised voices through the office door. The words weren't clear, but the emotion was. Then silence. And when Laura came out, her face was pale, her eyes red. When asked if she was okay, she just said, "Some people wear masks better than others." After that, something changed. She stopped eating lunch in the staff room, started locking her classroom door during breaks. And then there was the file. One student remembered seeing her slide a manila folder into her bag one day after school. When asked what it was, she smiled and said, "Just something I need to hold on to for a while." She looked nervous, like whatever was in that folder wasn't supposed to exist. Spring came. Her students noticed the dark circles under her eyes, the way she'd pause mid-lesson like her mind was elsewhere. Once, when Ethan lingered after class, he asked quietly, "Miss Bennett, are you okay?" She looked at him, hesitated, then said, "Sometimes telling the truth feels dangerous, but it's always worth it." That was the last real conversation anyone remembers her having. 2 weeks before she disappeared, she filed a formal complaint to the school board. No one ever saw the contents. The report went missing from the system days later. But what little evidence survived hinted at something serious. Financial inconsistencies, forged records, and the name Thomas Keene mentioned more than once. Whatever she'd uncovered, it scared her. The week before October 14th, Laura told a friend she was thinking about leaving town. "Just for a while," she said, "to clear my head." But she never did. Instead, she stayed late that final Wednesday night, long after everyone else had gone. After her disappearance, the rumors reignited. Some believed she ran away. Others whispered darker theories. Detective Ellison kept circling back to that complaint and the missing file. If Laura had found proof of wrongdoing, it could have given someone a motive to silence her. But there was one more strange detail: her classroom desk. When investigators opened it, they found only the usual: pens, papers, lesson plans, except for one drawer, locked, tightly. The janitor said she never locked her desk, ever. But when the school gave permission to force it open, the drawer was empty. Completely. Whatever was inside had been removed, maybe the night she vanished. Over time, Laura Bennett became less a person and more a story. The kind parents told new teachers when they joined the staff. The kind that floated around the hallways like a ghost. Her classroom stayed closed for a year. Then the school quietly reopened it for new teachers. The desk remained, same scratches, same lock. No one thought much of it again. Until 6 years later, when a new student named Grace Holloway sat down in that same room and found something wedged deep in the back of that desk. Something that would unravel everything. Laura Bennett tried to tell the truth, but sometimes, when you speak against the wrong person, the truth doesn't set you free. It disappears with you. It's 2015. Brookdale High hasn't changed much. Same old lockers, same creaky hall floors, same pale blue walls lined with motivational posters that no one reads anymore. But for a new generation of students, the story of the missing teacher was little more than a local myth. Something older siblings whispered about on Halloween nights. That's how Grace Holloway first heard the name Laura Bennett.
Grace was 16. Quiet, curious, the kind of student who noticed details others overlooked. She'd just transferred from another district after her parents' divorce. New school, new faces, same awkwardness of trying to fit in. On our first day, her homeroom teacher introduced himself. Mr. Keene, English, room 108. Grace smiled politely. She didn't know the history of that classroom, or the ghost story attached to it. Not yet. The semester started like any other. Pop quizzes, group projects, teenage drama. Mr. Keene seemed nice enough, a little intense, but charming in that way teachers sometimes are when they try too hard to be liked. He complimented Grace's writing, often keeping her after class to discuss her essays. He said she had a natural gift for truth. At first, she appreciated it. Then something about his tone started to unsettle her. It began small, the way he'd lean over her desk just a little too close, how his hand would linger a second longer when returning her graded papers, the way his eyes followed her as she walked away. She tried to ignore it, convince herself she was imagining things. But one afternoon, while working late on an essay, she noticed something strange about her desk, the one she'd sat at since the start of the year. It wobbled slightly. She reached underneath to tighten a screw and felt something wedged inside. It was flat, paper-like, tucked deep between the inner frame and the wood backing. She pulled gently. It wouldn't move, so she grabbed her pencil and pried it loose. A folded piece of paper, yellowed and brittle, edges worn, ink faded. Her name wasn't on it, but the handwriting, delicate, cursive, slightly slanted, looked old. At the top, a date, October 14th, 2009. Her stomach dropped. Grace opened it carefully. The note read, "If anyone finds this, something has gone very wrong. Please tell them to look in the lake house, the one behind Mill Road." He said no one would believe me, but someone has to. It was signed, Laura Bennett. Grace froze. The name looked familiar. She turned to the girl sitting next to her and whispered, "Hey, who's Laura Bennett?" The girl blinked. "Oh, her? She's that teacher who disappeared years ago. They never found her." "Why?" Grace swallowed hard. No reason. But inside, she was shaking. That night, she couldn't sleep. She stared at the note again and again, tracing the shaky handwriting. Was it real? Some prank? The paper felt too old to be fake. The words too desperate to be a joke. And what was the lake house? She looked it up. There was a Mill Road, 10 minutes from the school. And behind it, an abandoned property. The locals called it the Old Keene Cabin. That name made her blood run cold. The next day, Grace stayed after class. She waited until everyone else had left. Then she asked, "Mr. Keene, did you know a teacher named Laura Bennett?" He froze, just for a second.
before smiling. "Ah, Miss Bennett. Yes, of course. Lovely woman. Tragic what happened to her." He turned back to his desk, straightening papers. Too calm, too controlled. Grace hesitated, then asked, "Did she teach in this room?" His eyes flickered toward her. "Why do you ask?" Her heartbeat quickened. "I just heard stories." He smiled again, but this time his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Be careful what stories you believe, Grace. Some things are better left buried." She went home trembling. But curiosity, or maybe instinct, wouldn't let her stop thinking about that note. That weekend she told her best friend Lena. They decided to check out the place mentioned, the lake house behind Mill Road. They biked there at dusk. The air smelled of pine and rain. The old wooden house stood half collapsed, covered in ivy.
It looked abandoned for years. Grace's flashlight beam cut through the dark, catching glints of broken glass and old police tape. They stepped inside. Each floorboard groaned under their weight. "Do you really think she was here?" Lena whispered. Grace held up the note. "She said this house. It has to mean something." In the back room, they found an overturned chair, old notebooks, and something else, a broken picture frame. Inside was a photo, faded but still clear enough to see, Laura Bennett. And standing next to her, Thomas Keene. They looked happy, close, too close. Lena whispered, "That's your teacher." Grace's chest tightened. Her mind raced. Why was Laura with him? Why had she mentioned this place in her note? And why had he lied about barely knowing her? As they searched further, Grace noticed a small gap in the wooden wall. Inside was a metal tin, rusted shut. She pried it open with a rock. Inside were more papers, soggy, stained, but still legible. Letters, reports, receipts. One sheet stood out, a printed copy of a formal complaint dated 2009, filed by Laura Bennett, accusing Thomas Keene of abuse of authority and coercion of students. Grace's hand shook so hard she almost dropped it. Suddenly, a noise. Footsteps outside. They froze. A flashlight beam swept across the window. A man's voice called out, "Who's in there?" Grace's heart pounded. That voice, she knew it. Mr. Keene. He'd followed them. They ran, out the back door, through the trees. Behind them, his voice echoed, low and furious. "Grace, come back! It's not what you think!" They didn't stop until they reached the main road. Breathless, shaking, Grace still clutching the tin. Inside it, the truth Laura Bennett had tried to protect. Later that night, Grace sat on her bed, staring at the documents spread out before her. It all connected. The complaint, the note, the house. Laura knew something. Something that got her killed. And the man responsible was still teaching at the very same school. Laura Bennett tried to warn them, but her truth was buried deep beneath fear, until a student brave enough to listen finally dug it up. Grace didn't sleep that night. The folder from the lake house sat on her desk. Papers spread like broken glass, fragile, dangerous, impossible to ignore. Every line she read made her chest tighten more. Laura Bennett's complaint detailed months of harassment, threats, and blackmail, all aimed at her by one man, Thomas Keene. He wasn't the charming teacher everyone believed him to be. He was a predator, hiding behind lesson plans and polite smiles.
Laura had discovered that he was manipulating grades for certain students in exchange for favors. She confronted him. He threatened her. And then she vanished. By morning, Grace made a decision. She couldn't keep this to herself. She stuffed the documents in her backpack and biked to the Brookdale Police Department. Inside, she found Detective Mark Ellison, the same officer who'd led the original investigation back in 2009. He looked older now, tired eyes, grayer at the temples, the weight of an unsolved case sitting heavy on his shoulders. Grace handed him the papers, her voice trembling. "I found these in a desk. They're from Laura Bennett. I think she was trying to expose someone." Ellison read in silence, his brow tightening. After a long pause, he said quietly, "Where did you get this?" Grace hesitated.
The old lake house, behind Mill Road. He froze. That location had come up in the original search, but they'd found nothing back then. "You went there alone?" he asked. Grace nodded. "He was there too, Mr. Keene. He followed us." The detective's face hardened. "Grace, you need to stay away from him. Do you understand?" She nodded, though fear was already spreading in her chest. Within hours, the station buzzed with movement. Ellison reopened the Bennett file, pulling out yellowed reports and photographs. For 6 years, he had been haunted by that case. No body, no motive, no closure. Now, suddenly, there was both. At the school, whispers began again. Students saw police cars outside room 108. Teachers were questioned. Old wounds reopened. Mr. Keene stayed calm, too calm. When a local reporter approached him in the parking lot, he smiled politely and said, "I loved Laura like a sister. It breaks my heart they're still using her name to smear mine." But behind closed doors, he was unraveling. Grace noticed at first, the way he glared at her in class, the subtle comments, "You shouldn't believe everything you find." Curiosity can get people hurt. She started sitting near the door, ready to leave at any moment. Her friends told her to drop it, but she couldn't. Something deep inside told her Laura's story deserved to be finished, no matter the cost. Meanwhile, Ellison followed the trail the note had left behind. The lake house was officially owned by the Keene family, a property Thomas had inherited from his uncle. No one had checked it in years. This time they brought ground-penetrating radar, and 20 feet behind the cabin, they found something. A patch of disturbed soil. When they dug, they unearthed a metal lockbox, sealed shut with rust. Inside, a flash drive, a journal, and a locket. The initials engraved on the locket read LB. The flash drive was carefully examined by forensics. It contained emails all from Laura Bennett's school account, drafts that were never sent. Each one detailed her fear, her evidence, her plan to report Keene to the district attorney. In the last entry, dated the night she vanished, she wrote, "He knows. He came to my classroom after dark. If I don't make it home, tell the truth for me." Detective Ellison closed the laptop, his hands shaking. She tried to warn us. She really tried. With that, a search warrant was issued for Keene's home and vehicle. 2 days later, police found traces of blood in the trunk of his old Honda Accord, matching Laura's DNA. Her bracelet, long missing from evidence, was found beneath a loose panel in the car's rear compartment. The truth was undeniable now. Thomas Keene was arrested on charges of murder, obstruction, and evidence tampering. When the news broke, Brookdale fell silent. Parents pulled their kids out of class. Former students posted memories of Laura online, stories of how she'd believed in them, stood up for them, changed their lives. And then, amid all the heartbreak,
one name appeared again and again: Grace Holloway, the girl who found the note. But not everyone was relieved. Grace began receiving anonymous messages online. You shouldn't have stayed quiet. She was gone for a reason. Her windows rattled one night, though no one was outside. She couldn't prove it, but she felt it. Someone was watching her. Maybe Keene had allies. Maybe someone else at the school had helped cover it up. The fear came back, heavier this time. A week before the trial, Grace received a small envelope with no return address. Inside was a single line, typed, "Thank you for listening." No signature, but the handwriting on the outside, the way the G curved, looked hauntingly familiar. Laura's. At trial, Keene denied everything. He claimed Laura had framed him after he rejected her advances. But the evidence, the notes, the flash drive, and the DNA spoke louder than he ever could. Grace testified bravely. When asked why she risked so much, she said simply,
Because she didn't deserve to be forgotten. The jury deliberated for only 5 hours. Guilty on all counts. Keene showed no emotion as the verdict was read. But Grace saw it. That flicker of recognition in his eyes. Like he finally realized the one thing Laura had taught her students best. That truth, no matter how deeply buried, always finds a way back to the surface. For 6 years, one desk held a secret that could have changed everything. But it took one student brave enough to look beneath the surface to finish a story that began with fear and ended with justice. Justice. It's supposed to bring peace. But when the verdict came down, Brookdale didn't cheer. It went silent. For 6 years, the town had buried its guilt along with Laura Bennett's story. Now every parent, every teacher, every student had to face the truth. They'd let her voice fade away. The trial made national headlines. News crews parked outside the school for weeks. Former students were interviewed, each describing the same woman: kind, gentle, protective. But the question everyone kept asking was, how did no one see it? How had Thomas Keene fooled them all? How had a predator hiding in plain sight for years, smiling in class photos, grading papers, handing out A's and fake praise? The answer was simple. He hid behind trust, and he used it like a weapon. For Grace Holloway, life changed overnight. She became the girl who solved the case. Her face was on the news. Her words were quoted everywhere. But inside, she didn't feel like a hero. She felt hunted. Every time she passed room 108, she saw Laura's face in her mind. Tired, hopeful, scared. She thought about how close she'd come to being silenced too. Some nights she woke up gasping, still hearing Keene's voice calling from the trees that night at the lake house. But then she remembered Laura's final note. Please tell them to look. And that's exactly what she did. The school replaced the old desks that summer, but Grace kept one thing. The original piece of paper she'd found, folded and worn. She kept it in a frame above her desk at home. It reminded her that courage doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it's written in trembling handwriting, hidden inside a desk, waiting years for someone to find it. Detective Ellison retired a year later. At his farewell gathering, he gave a small speech. He said, "We spend our lives chasing truth, thinking it hides in evidence.
but sometimes the truth hides in people, the ones brave enough to listen to what others tried to silence. He looked at Grace when he said it. The town built a memorial garden beside the school. A small plaque beneath a maple tree read, "In memory of Laura Bennett, 1978-2009. She taught us to see the truth and to never stop asking questions." Every spring, her former students place wildflowers there. No ceremony, no speeches, just quiet remembrance. And sometimes when the wind moves through the branches, it almost sounds like pages turning. In 2018, Grace graduated high school. Her speech wasn't about awards or success. It was about one lesson Laura had written years ago on the chalkboard. Stories teach us who we are when no one's watching. Grace paused before repeating it to her classmates. Then she added, "And the stories we tell, or choose to ignore, can save lives." The gymnasium went silent, and for a brief moment, everyone remembered the teacher who had once stood at that very podium, smiling beneath the same pale lights, believing her truth mattered. After graduation, Grace went to college to study journalism. Not to chase fame, but to protect stories like Laura's, the ones that get buried under fear, silence, and power. Her first major project? A podcast series titled The Desk. Episode 1 opened with her voice, steady, calm, but filled with emotion. Sometimes the past hides in the smallest places. A drawer, a letter, a story someone was too scared to tell. This is where her voice was found.
It went viral. Millions listened. And for the first time, Laura Bennett's story wasn't a mystery, it was a movement. But still, some mysteries remained. The envelope Grace had received before the trial, the one that said, "Thank you for listening." No fingerprints, no trace of who sent it. Some said it was a copy of an old note that Laura herself had written and mailed before her death. Others believed someone close to her, maybe an old friend or fellow teacher, sent it to honor her memory. Grace never found out. She didn't need to. Because to her, it didn't matter who sent it. What mattered was the message, the echo of a voice that refused to stay silent, even in death. Years later, Room 108 became something else, a safe space for students to talk, not just about literature, but about life, about truth, about the courage to speak up when something feels wrong. A new teacher took over, but the spirit of Laura Bennett remained. Her quote still hung on the wall, same bold marker, same words. Stories teach us who we are when no one's watching. Below it, in smaller handwriting, someone had added, "And courage begins when someone decides to listen." Voiceover, slow, emotional, final. Laura Bennett's story began with silence, but it ended with a voice. One young girl who refused to look away. It's easy to bury the truth, but no matter how deep it's hidden, it waits for someone brave enough to dig it up. And when they do, justice doesn't just rise, it speaks.